Welcome back to Sissy Maya. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to never miss an update. Additionally, consider subscribing to my Patreon to get access to these features, and much more. 10-year-old Miller Chapman was a proud and arrogant boy. Without a father figure to rein him in, he often got his way and enjoyed bossing younger children around at school, making him unpopular. He held disdain for girls of any age, often mocking them openly. Despite his antisocial behavior being known to teachers, he managed to evade trouble when they were around. His mild-mannered mother struggled with his bullying ways, constantly receiving complaints from other parents. She tried various methods to correct him, to no avail. Even boys his own age didn't care for him. But pride precedes a fall, and fate had a lesson in store for him. It happened during his primary school days in the 1950s, a time of stricter gender roles with separate school entrances for boys and girls. One summer afternoon during recess, while swaggering around the playground, Miller collided with little Emily Harris. She fell, scraping her knee badly. Instead of showing concern as she cried, he yelled, "Why don't you watch where you're going, you stupid idiot?" This incident triggered a reaction. Emily's older sister, Samantha, witnessed the scene and vowed revenge. That afternoon, she gathered her friends, Jenny, Christine, Angela, and Tina, to plot against Miller. They aimed to deflate his arrogance and humiliate him in front of the entire school, ensuring he would never repeat his bullying. "I think we need something to puncture his arrogance," Jenny suggested. "Something that will embarrass him so much, he'll never live it down." "I agree," Samantha replied. "But it has to be something he'll hate and won't suspect was from us." The girls pondered in silence, brainstorming how best to teach Miller a lesson he wouldn't forget. Angela pondered aloud, "You know, I remember last year when my brother ended up playing a girl in his school play. He tolerated it, but he absolutely despised it. Boys really hate being dressed as girls." "That's so true," Samantha grinned. "What a brilliant idea. Imagine tough Miller Chapman dressed as one of those sweet little girls he's always picking on." "That would be priceless," she chuckled. "But how do we pull it off without getting caught? He's certainly not going to volunteer for this." They deliberated further until Samantha had a spark of inspiration. She grinned broadly, saying, "I think I've got it. We'll need some cooperation from a couple of the boys, but that shouldn't be too hard. He's not exactly popular with them either." "Oh yes, this is going to be perfect. Here's the plan." As she detailed her idea, giggles spread around the room. The trap just needed to be set and sprung. The following Wednesday morning, the older classes were bussed to a swimming pool about 10 miles away. Mr. Milan supervised the boys, and Miss Smith oversaw the girls. Upon arrival, the students headed to individual changing cubicles around the pool to change into their swimwear, leaving their clothes hanging up. They had 10 minutes to change, 40 minutes to swim, and 15 minutes to dry off before returning to school. As usual, Miller caused chaos by splashing and annoying his classmates. Despite Miss Smith's repeated warnings, he continued his rude behavior, testing her patience and frustrating the other students. When swim time ended, a whistle blew, signaling everyone to leave the pool, dry off, and change back into their uniforms. The moment of reckoning had arrived. Miller returned to his cubicle, opened the door, and found a girl's blue and white gingham school dress hanging where his clothes should have been. Confused and annoyed, he exclaimed, "What the? Hey, where are my clothes?" Nearby boys heard him and soon gathered around, laughing as they saw him holding the dress. Mr. Milan, curious about the commotion, approached to find out what was happening. "What's going on, Michael?" he asked. "What's the problem?" "It's my clothes, sir," Miller lamented, holding up the dress with disdain. "They've disappeared. Someone swapped them for a girls' school uniform. I can't wear this," he added, displaying the dress with evident distaste. "Are you sure this is your cubicle?" Mr. Milan asked, trying to be helpful. "You're certain it's not one of the girls' cubicles?" "No, sir, it's number 20. "I'm sure," Miller replied. "Just a moment." Mr. Milan called out,
Miss Smith, has any of the girls found a boys' school uniform in their cubicle? After a brief pause, Miss Smith approached, asking, No, everything here is as it should be.
Why?
What's happened? Well, Mr. Milan explained, it seems someone with a sense of humor has swapped Michael Chapman's uniform with a girl's.
Are you sure all the girls have their correct uniforms?
Yes, absolutely. Oh dear, it looks like Master Chapman has quite the predicament, Miss Smith remarked, a faint smile betraying her amusement as she anticipated what was to come given his frequent misbehavior. Well, she said with mock seriousness, returning the dress to its hook, if this is all he has to wear, then he'll have to wear it back to school, won't he? Mr. Milan reluctantly agreed, Yes, I suppose so. Perhaps you should assist him in putting it on. Miller listened with growing horror. His bravado vanished as he realized the teachers were serious about making him wear the girls' school uniform back to school. Oh please, Miss Smith, he pleaded desperately, you can't make me wear this. I'll be a laughingstock. I'm sorry, Michael, she replied, trying to maintain a serious demeanor as she entered the cubicle with him. There's no other choice. Now, let's get you dressed. We've already wasted enough time, and the others are waiting. She closed the cubicle door while Mr. Milan went to gather the children outside. Now then, young man, Miss Smith said firmly, taking down a pair of navy blue knickers from the hook, step into these. She held them out in front of him, and with a sigh of resignation, Miller stepped into them while she pulled them up to his waist. Next came a white vest, which she quickly helped him put on over his head and tucked into his knickers. Then she retrieved the dress and held it out for him to put on. It was a typical girls' primary school summer dress, made of blue and white check gingham, featuring a row of white buttons up the front to the neck. It had short sleeves with white cuffs, a white pointed collar, and a chest pocket with a white trim along the opening. The belt, fitted with a white plastic buckle, was threaded through 2 loops attached to the sides of the waist, with a buttonhole at the end to secure it in place. She held the dress up and slipped it over Miller's head, guiding his arms into the sleeves. Pulling it down, she fastened the buttons up to his neck and secured the belt firmly around his waist. She then helped him into a pair of neatly folded white ankle socks, followed by brown T-bar Mary Jane strap shoes with side buckles, ensuring they were securely fastened. Miller blushed deeply, feeling uncomfortably like a little girl being dressed by her mother. Stepping back to inspect her handiwork, Miss Smith teased, "Oh yes, that's lovely. You're starting to look just like one of the girls, aren't you?" She relished every moment of deflating the boy's ego. Next, she retrieved a royal blue blazer and held it out for him to put on. He obediently slipped his arms into the sleeves as she pulled it up onto his shoulders and adjusted the sleeves neatly over his wrists. "Now," she continued, "one last thing, your school hat. All the girls wear it, you know." Taking down a cream-colored straw school hat with a royal blue hat band, she carefully placed it on his head and secured the elastic band under his chin. "There we go," she said, straightening the hat. "All set. Now, let's join the others." Exiting the cubicle, they walked toward the stairs leading up to the entrance hall. Miller shuffled along, clearly dreading the impending humiliation. Miss Smith, accustomed to dealing with reluctant boys, firmly guided him through the front door and out into the open. Word had spread about Miller's predicament, and the other children eagerly awaited his appearance outside. As Miss Smith reluctantly dragged him into view, laughter erupted from the boys while the girls squealed with delight. "Who's the new little girl?" one girl called out, followed by a chorus of teasing remarks. "Isn't she adorable?" giggled another. "I bet Michael's sister got lost," joked one boy. "Her name must be Michaela now. Her school uniform fits perfectly," remarked another girl. "She looks so sweet." Mr. Milan allowed them a moment of amusement, quietly satisfied to see the bully humbled. Suppressing his own laughter, he intervened. "All right everyone, settle down. Pair up and let's head back to the bus stop. And Michael," Miss Smith added, "you'd better walk in front with the girls. It'll make you less noticeable, unless you want everyone on the street staring at you." Blushing deeply, Michael reluctantly joined the girls, realizing the wisdom in her suggestion. Dressed as he was, he blended in among them, and passers-by would simply assume he was one of the girls. However, his schoolmates knew better, relishing the chance to tease him. Samantha and her friends intentionally walked alongside him, filling his ears with a constant stream of teasing remarks. He could do nothing but endure it. The line of children made their way to the bus stop, where they waited for the bus to arrive. A few people at the stop grinned broadly upon seeing Miller, as the other children eagerly pointed him out, explaining that this was his punishment for being a bully. When the bus finally arrived, Miller found himself surrounded by girls who seemed to have an endless supply of comments about his embarrassing attire. It was sheer torture so far, and Samantha and her friends had more planned for him. Upon arriving near the school, they disembarked and walked back through the main gate just in time for lunch. Inside the school, as they headed to the dining hall, Miller approached Miss Smith. "Please, miss, can I go home and change now?" he pleaded. However, Miss Smith saw this as an opportunity to enforce his punishment without explicitly punishing him, especially considering his history of bullying smaller children. She felt a sense of justice for those he had mistreated and saw this humiliation as a way to curb his arrogance for good. Wearing her serious expression, she replied, "No, Michael. You'll stay as you are. If I let you go home, you'll miss your afternoon lessons. You'll have to stay like this until you get home after school. Now come along and have your lunch." Crestfallen, Miller followed Miss Smith to the dining hall. By the time he arrived, nearly all the seats were taken, and he had to sit conspicuously at the end of one of the tables. As soon as the younger children spotted him, especially those he had bullied in the past, they burst into laughter, all dressed identically to him. This was their moment of revenge, and they savored every minute of it. Even the staff at the end of the table couldn't help but grin at his predicament. Mr. Milan had forewarned them, and they all found some satisfaction in witnessing Miller's comeuppance. It was truly a day of reckoning for him. As he settled at the table, Miss Smith instructed, "Michael, please take off your hat. Hats aren't allowed indoors." Blushing deeply under the attention, he complied, hanging the hat over the back of his seat by its chin elastic, mimicking what he had seen the girls do. Lunch was a miserable affair, and he felt no appetite as the teasing continued. He found himself almost looking forward to the afternoon lessons, where at least the chatter might cease. But for the next half hour, he endured it. Finally, lunch ended, and the children dispersed to the playground until afternoon lessons. Michael joined them, carrying the humiliating school hat in his hands. He couldn't escape the teasing of his classmates and wondered apprehensively about what the afternoon held in store. By now, he was thoroughly subdued, his earlier swagger gone. It seemed the harsh lesson was beginning to have an effect. The bell rang, and the children filed into their classrooms. As Miller entered with his classmates, Miss Wilkins greeted him with a smile. "Well, Michael," she said, "since you're dressed as a girl today, you'd better sit with the girls at the front left. Over here. Get your books from your desk first." Miller retrieved his books from his desk and walked over to where he found himself seated next to Fiona McPherson. She looked at him, giggled, and said, "Here you are, Michaela. Sit next to me. Put your hat in your desk, dear." He complied, trying to ignore the amused gazes directed at him. The history lesson began, providing Miller some relief from the incessant teasing. After history came math, and then they awaited Mr. Perry for the final lesson of the afternoon. Samantha leaned over from her desk and remarked, "Hey, Michaela, looking forward to going home?" Miller remained silent, prompting her to add, "Well, we are, believe me." Her words sounded ominous, but Miller had no time to dwell on them as Mr. Perry entered and began the geography lesson. Geography was usually one of Miller's stronger subjects, but on this occasion, he struggled to concentrate, anxiously eyeing the wall clock. He had a sinking feeling that going home would involve some special treatment courtesy of his classmates. Unfortunately, it seemed he was right. Miller kept stealing glances at the clock, almost willing it to stop, but the hands continued their relentless march. He jumped when the school bell finally rang at 3:30. As was customary, they had to wait for the teacher to leave first, leaving Miller with a sinking feeling of being abandoned to his fate. And in a way, he was. It was time to go home, but not in the quiet, solitary manner he had hoped for. His plan had been to linger behind until everyone else had left, then slip away by the quickest, least noticeable route to avoid being seen. However, fate had something far more eventful in store. Once Mr. Perry exited the classroom, Miller found himself immediately surrounded by several girls. Fiona stood with arms folded, a triumphant grin on her face as she declared, "Now then, Michaela, we can't have a little girl like you walking home alone. We've decided to escort you. Aren't we kind?" Miller remained silent, unsure of what was coming next. He didn't have to wait long to find out. Two larger girls known for their athletic prowess took hold of his arms and led him out into the corridor, down the stairs, and across the playground with the others. They guided him to the back of the school and into the vacant sports pavilion, where they closed the door behind them. "Here we are," announced Tina Washington, the tallest girl in the school. "We'll have some privacy here. Sit him down in that chair and hold him steady while I work on his hair." His hair. Miller wondered anxiously what they had in store. Before he could protest, 6 girls took hold of him and firmly seated him in a sturdy wooden chair, ensuring he couldn't move. "Don't worry," Tina reassured with a smile. "We're not going to harm you. We just want to give you a little makeover to match the style of the girls you've bullied." Her grin widened as she pulled out 2 white hair ribbons, hair slides, elastic bands, and a comb from her blazer pocket. Miller's heart sank. They couldn't be serious. But they were. "All right, hold his head still," Tina instructed, laying out the items on a nearby table. One girl positioned herself behind Miller, hooking her arm around his neck to keep his head steady while Tina got to work. First, she carefully combed his hair, creating a center part. Then, gathering each side into a bunch, she secured them close to his head with elastic bands. Next came the ribbons, tightly wound around each bunch of hair and tied into neat bows, ensuring they wouldn't slip. Tina adjusted the 2 bows until they were perfectly even, then stepped back to admire her handiwork. "There we go," she remarked with satisfaction. "Now he really looks the part of a little girl. Good thing his hair was so long, those ribbons should stay in place nicely." "They definitely will," chuckled Sue, giving the ribbons a slight tug. "But for that extra touch of cuteness," grinned Tina mischievously, "we'll need these." She picked up a pair of white plastic hair slides shaped like small bows, slid the metal clips beneath Miller's hair just below each ribbon, and clicked them shut firmly. She then used the comb to tidy the front of his hair into a neat fringe. "There we are," Tina announced. "All done. Doesn't he look adorable? Even more girly than with just the school hat, don't you think?" The chorus of giggles from the girls confirmed their delight in Miller's transformation. "Now, one more thing," Tina continued, putting the comb back in her pocket. "I don't want him yanking those ribbons out at the first opportunity, so let's secure his hands. I've got just the thing to keep him under control, especially where we're going." She instructed the girls to stand Miller up and hold his hands behind his back. Despite his feeble attempt to resist, he was no match for their combined effort. "Now then," Tina said with a grin, reaching into her blazer pocket, "guess what I've got?" She chuckled as she produced a shiny pair of steel handcuffs. "Borrowed these from my brother," she explained. "They're real, though, so no worries. Lucky for you, I've got the key. Hold him steady, will you?" Tina moved behind Miller, swiftly placing the handcuffs on his wrists and securing them with a series of clicks. There was no chance he could free himself. "All right, girls, you can let him go," Tina instructed, and the girls released Miller. He spun around momentarily, futilely tugging at the handcuffs and attempting to reach up to remove the embarrassing hair ribbons. Realizing his efforts were futile, he resigned himself to their whims, knowing he had no choice but to play along. Tina positioned herself in front of Miller and taunted, "Giving up already? Smart move. You won't be getting out of those handcuffs until I decide, which means those darling ribbons will stay in place for now." Isn't that nice? She continued, now, it's time to fill you in on the plan. You probably thought you could sneak home unnoticed. Well, that won't do, will it? We have a much better idea. We're taking you for a nice stroll into town so everyone can admire how pretty you look. By the way, a couple of the boys have gone to your house to let your mum know you're having tea with them, so she won't expect you back for a while. I'd love to see how you explain to her why you're dressed like a cute little schoolgirl. So, now, she continued, let's get moving. Hold on to him tight and let's go. Two of the larger girls grasped Miller, who struggled helplessly, and pulled him towards the door and outside, beginning his ordeal. They quickly departed the school grounds unnoticed and headed towards the town center, where more and more people congregated. Most passers-by didn't realize the beribboned figure was actually a boy, but those who did grinned broadly, especially after hearing the girl's explanation. Bullies never garner sympathy, and witnessing one being humbled in such a manner prompted approval from many members of the public. As they approached the heart of town, the girls took delight in parading Miller up and down the main street several times, ensuring he was as conspicuous as possible. Finally, they decided to take a break and led Miller into a coffee bar. They ordered milkshakes all around and seated Miller between the two largest girls. When the waitress brought the shakes, Tina looked at Miller and asked, "Had enough, bully boy? Learned your lesson?" Miller looked at her, his lower lip trembling, and replied quietly, "Yes." His spirit was shattered, and all traces of his aggressive arrogance seemed to have evaporated. Yet Tina wasn't entirely satisfied. "I hope so, for your sake," Tina said sternly. "Because if we catch you bullying the little ones again, today will seem mild in comparison. Got that?" "Yes, Tina," Miller mumbled, visibly contrite. "Very well," Tina said, taking the key to the handcuffs from her pocket. "Now I'm going to remove these cuffs, but on one condition." "What's that?" "That you don't touch those ribbons," Tina insisted. "They stay until you get home, and we'll make sure of it. One attempt to remove them and the cuffs go back on. Understand?" "Understood," Miller replied quietly. "Good," Tina said. She leaned behind him, clicked open the handcuffs, and placed them back in her pocket. "All right, Michaela," she smiled patronizingly, "now sit there like a good little girl and finish your milkshake." Rubbing his wrists briefly, Miller complied, gratefully sipping through his straw. The teasing from the girls began to taper off, partly because they were running out of taunts, but also sensing that Miller was genuinely repentant for his past behavior. Whether they had truly cured him remained to be seen, but the intense humiliation seemed to have made an impact. After finishing their milkshakes, Tina retrieved Miller's belongings, keys and money, from her pocket and returned them to him. They settled the bill at the counter and then escorted Miller back out onto the street to accompany him home. They were determined to ensure his punishment continued all the way to his front door, which it did. Along the way, the girls chuckled as they noticed how many people continued to be amused by Miller's appearance. This final humiliating journey lasted another half-hour until they reached his front gate. "All right then, Miller," Tina said firmly, "that's it. We hope you've learned your lesson. Behave yourself from now on, and we'll let this go. But remember, I meant what I said about facing something worse if you step out of line. Now, off you go. Your clothes will be in your desk at school tomorrow morning, and you can bring back that girl's school uniform with you. I doubt you'll want to see it again, right? All right, we'll see you at school in the morning. Go on, inside you go." Miller said goodbye gratefully and approached the front door. His heart pounded as he wondered how he would explain his appearance to his mother. "Is that you, Michael?" came a voice from the kitchen. "Yes, Mum," he replied, taking a deep breath. He walked down the hallway and into the kitchen. His mother was at the sink, peeling vegetables. As he entered, she turned to look at him. She froze momentarily, then her face transformed into amazement. "What the?" she exclaimed. "Michael, what on earth are you doing dressed like that?" Her amazement quickly turned to a grin, followed by chuckles. "What happened? And where are your clothes?" "The others tricked me," Miller explained hurriedly. Someone swapped my clothes for this silly girls' school uniform while we were at the baths. We couldn't find mine, so I had to wear this all day. Oh, Mum, it's been awful. The kids teased me mercilessly, and after school, the girls even took me into town like this. It was humiliating. Everyone was laughing at me. His mother sat him down at the kitchen table. But why would they do that? There must be a reason. Can you think of anything? As difficult as it was, Miller decided to come clean. Well, the other day, I was really mean to Samantha Harris's younger sister, Emily. She bumped into me and fell down. She hurt her knee and started crying, but I just yelled at her for running into me. Anyway, the other kids didn't like it, so they set me up. Oh, Michael, his mother sighed wearily, not again. How many times have I told you to stop being a bully? You have a terrible reputation, and this isn't the first time by any means. I've lost count of the number of complaints I've received about this. So you had to spend the day dressed as a girl. How did you feel? Humiliated? Awful, Miller admitted. They made a fool out of me, and I struggled not to cry. Can you imagine me crying? I'll never live this down, and my reputation is shot. Worse, the girls said they'd do something worse if I bully anyone again. Mum, I'm scared. For the first time, his mother felt a glimmer of hope that someone had finally found a way to address her son's uncontrollable behavior, and surprisingly, it wasn't her or the teachers at his school, it was the children themselves who had united to confront him, and it appeared they had succeeded. Well, I don't think you need to worry, she said thoughtfully. It seems all you have to do is stop bullying the smaller children, and everything will be fine, won't it? That's what they're suggesting. Now, let's go upstairs and get you changed. Tomorrow, I'll speak with the headmistress at school and see what we can do to find out who did this to you. All right. Feeling assured that action was being taken, Miller went up to his bedroom where his mother began to carefully remove the hair ribbons and comb through his hair. I have to admit, Michael, she smiled warmly, you do make quite a convincing girl. Now, let's get out of this dress. Soon, he had shed the girls' school uniform and swiftly changed into a shirt and jeans. Looking at himself in the mirror, he breathed a sigh of relief, while his mother neatly folded the uniform and placed it in a carrier bag. I'll take this back to the school tomorrow, she assured him. By the way, do you know where your other clothes are, the ones you wore to school this morning? They said I'll find them in my desk tomorrow. Good. You can bring them home with you then. It's a good thing you have another uniform to wear. I wouldn't want to send you back to school tomorrow in a dress, she teased gently. Oh, Mum. All right, I'm just kidding. Let's go and get dinner ready. They returned downstairs, and she prepared their evening meal. Throughout the evening, she asked him a few more questions to better understand what had transpired, and by the time Michael went to bed, she felt reassured that no real harm had been done. In fact, she believed that if this experience had successfully curbed his antisocial behavior, it was well worth it. The next morning, she drove Miller to school and dropped him off to join the other children. Waiting until morning assembly concluded and the first lessons began, she then proceeded to the office. There, she explained the previous day's events and arranged an appointment to meet with the headmaster, Mr. Milan, and Miss Smith later that afternoon. Leaving the girls' school uniform with the school secretary, she returned home. True to their promise, the girls in Miller's class hardly mentioned the previous day's incident, and he understood he was now under scrutiny. All he needed to do was maintain control from then on. The day passed relatively normally, aside from occasional teasing remarks. When school ended that afternoon, Miller found his mother waiting outside in the car. "How was your day?" she asked. "All right, I guess. No one really said much, and I didn't want to talk about it. At least I've got my clothes back." He gestured to his other school uniform on the back seat. "Good. Wait here in the car for me. I'm going to speak with some teachers, then we'll go into town for tea." "Sound good?" "Okay, Mum." She left him in the car and headed inside to meet with the teachers who were waiting in the headmaster's study. The meeting went surprisingly smoothly, likely because they all felt Miller had received a necessary lesson in humility in a manner they couldn't officially endorse. No real harm had been done, and there was optimism that his problematic behavior had been corrected. It was agreed informally not to vigorously pursue the identification of those responsible for the clothes swap. A request for them to confess would be made as a formality, but little was expected to come of it. The incident would be discreetly overlooked, and hopefully, Miller had indeed turned over a new leaf. After the meeting, satisfied with the outcome, Miller's mother informed him that inquiries would be made, but not to anticipate significant action. It was up to him to demonstrate genuine change, and if he did, all would be well. The prospect of facing severe consequences if he reverted to his old ways was enough motivation to keep him on track. Gradually, he lost the inclination to behave badly anyway. As his conduct improved, he discovered that having friends wasn't so bad after all. By the time he moved up to secondary school the following year, he felt grateful to Tina and her friends for teaching him such a valuable lesson. He was truly a changed person, thanks to them. Sometimes, tough love is necessary, isn't it?